Greetings, humans of the internet. Welcome once again to Bowtie Talks. I, of course, am your excellent host, Luke Johnson, coming to you as usual from my disclosed location, Midwest USA, with some more historical insights. And I figured that since last week's episode was about the history of Memorial Day, which is often seen as the unofficial beginning of summer, it would be a good time to discuss the origins of summer break and some of the activities that are regularly done over the summer, like county fairs, vacations, and state fairs. So please join me as I dive headfirst into the origins of summer break. Now, I was taught, I'm sure like most Americans, that summer break happened during the 1800s when children needed to help their parents on the farm, and so it made sense to close schools due to low attendance. However, I have learned that is not actually the case. Children on farms never had summers off. They went to school during the hottest and coldest months of the year and stayed home during the spring and fall when the crops actually needed to be planted and harvested. And meanwhile, children in urban areas went to school all year long, including summers. And in 1842, Detroit, Michigan's academic year lasted 260 days. And only the very wealthy people during the decades before the Civil War vacationed in resort towns like Newport, Rhode Island, and Saratoga, New York. What brought this change to the masses, however, may have been... Actually, there's no may have been about it. It was the Industrial Revolution, which I have covered many times on this podcast, especially when talking about the history of public transit. But anyway, I digress. As more and more people made their way to cities and towns, the cities naturally grew denser, and therefore hotter, and it became evident there was a need to beat the heat. By 1869, the New York Times noticed that there was a growing sentiment between working men in its description of the sadly overridden businessman. From 1 year's end to another, he lives, for the most part, in a breathless hurry. If any folk in the wide world have a need of a summer refreshment, it is we, one man wrote. And it was also around this time that many coastal cities became tourist hotspots. Places like Asbury Park, New Jersey, Atlantic City, New Jersey, and Martha's Vineyard, just to name a few. Periodicals and tourist guides promoted an enticing escape to resort cities like Martha's Vineyard, which was called in one guide a maritime Eden where one may shut out the whole world and be content. Sounds quite nice. And naturally, when these people went on vacation, they brought their children with them, and this proved to be quite a problem for schools and school administrators. This was when school attendance wasn't mandatory, and so it was not uncommon to see classrooms being left half empty each summer. And so some legislators thought it would be a good idea to just give the children time off from summer anyway. And leisure time was becoming more important around this time. Working adults were getting more time to themselves because of labor unions, and advocates for vacation time also argued, albeit incorrectly, that the brain was a muscle, and like any muscle, it could suffer injuries if it was overused. And this need for leisure soon sparked the interest of a social scientist named Edward Hungerford, who wrote, "The magnitude of such a movement as this justifies the assumption that the social influence exerted by it are worthy of serious consideration." And considered it was. By the turn of the century, urban school districts had managed to cut roughly 60 school days from the most sweltering part of the year, and rural schools soon followed the same pattern so they wouldn't fall behind. And by the turn of the 20th century, summer vacation had become an American institution, thanks to advertisers, musicians, and authors who used the entire season of summer as a way of telling stories, often with themes of nostalgia and romance. One company that used summertime to its advantage was the Kodak Camera Company, which attracted customers with a campaign that solidified their cameras as essential tools for telling, quote, the story of a summer vacation. And schools have been let out for summer ever since. Although I must say, as a boy, I was always eager to get back to school. I know I was one of those weird kids who actually enjoyed school, but it is what it is. Or maybe you're weird for not enjoying school. But anyway, I digress. Another popular American summer institution is, of course, the American Summer Camp, which has been immortalized in movies, novels, and short stories, and whose origins, unsurprisingly, go hand in hand with the origins of summer vacation. During the Industrial Revolution, millions flocked to the cities. This caused moral reformers and educators to go up in arms, and a new generation of children, especially boys, they were concerned, were missing out on the character-building, health-promoting experiences of hardy rural life. Some even mentioned the perils of, quote, dying of indoorness, unquote. These reformers believed that a stint at a summer camp where children could be surrounded by nature and engaged in hard work and healthy play, all while under the guidance of counselors who helped shape moral uprightness, was the perfect solution. Educator and abolitionist Frederick Gunn was one such reformer. In the summer of 1861, 30 of his students at his Washington, Connecticut boarding school marched to a beach on the Long Island Sound, where they would set up camp. They would wake up in the morning to a bugle call and fall asleep under the stars after they sang patriotic songs by the fire. And during the day, between fishing and foraging, they would perform military drills in preparation for their eventual service in the Union Army. The gunnery camp, as it came to be known, was so successful that Gunn made a tradition of it. And so this was the first American summer camp, and many camps followed suit. These early summer camps were targeted mostly towards middle-class urban boys who, it was feared, were being pampered by overbearing mothers and female teachers in the overly quote-unquote feminized realms of homes and schools. It was believed that the young boys needed a dose of savagery. However, this project promoted an idea that reformers had first piloted with the working classes. In the 1850s, New York City's Children's Aid Society had shuttled quote-unquote street rats westward to be adopted by Christian farm families who were believed to be their last best hope for salvation from a life of poverty and vice. Classic moral reformers. Summer camp was not just for boys, though. By World War I, girls' camps had sprung up. Here they learned to cook, sew, and otherwise prepare for motherhood, and it was a standard part of cultivating virtuous young women who would resist the temptations of the new women, who wore short skirts, smoked, and did unspeakable acts according to these moral reformers. During the Second World War, summer camp began to resemble its modern form. Rather than preparing children for adulthood, camps aimed to prolong and protect childhood innocence. Camps became places where children could explore individual passions, the arts, sports, or outdoor life, in contrast to the presumed rigidity of school curriculum, watchful gaze of doting parents, and the circumstances that gave rise to summer camps in the first place. And children have been creating arts and crafts and friendships that never last ever since. Let's face it, we all know you're never going to see that person again. Another summertime institution, which happens to be near and dear to me and countless others, is the county fair. A time when livestock owners show what they have raised and what their children have raised, and people get to show off their baked goods. The very concept of fairs is very old. The origin of the fair can be traced back to ancient times, when fairs began as commercial events for traders to gather and sell their wares. And the book of Ezekiel in the Bible is one of the earliest sources that mentions what could be considered a fair. Eventually, fairs took a religious aspect to them, in which they would be large events where people would come together to worship in some form, as well as shop with the traders who would gather at these events. Ancient Rome and other ancient civilizations in the Middle East have evidence of these festivals, and it is believed that the word fair comes from the Latin word feria, meaning festival or holy day. This would continue well into the medieval era, when fairs would take place on various church holidays throughout the year. These fairs provided a break from everyday labor and an opportunity for merchants within and outside of a particular town or city to gather and do business. Fairs gave the attendees the opportunity to try and purchase agricultural products that would not necessarily be available to them, such as spices and various kinds of fruit. Livestock sales and bartering would also go on at fairs. In addition to business, medieval fairs offered various kinds of entertainment with music, dancing, magic, and plays depicting biblical stories. And when Europeans made their way to the New World, they took the concept of the fair with them. The earliest recorded fair in the Americas occurred in 1765 in Windsor, Nova Scotia, Canada. There was also a charter for a fair in York, Pennsylvania that same year. Many small fairs took place throughout the 1700s in Canada. However, the county fair, as most Americans know it, would begin in 1811 and was started by a man named Elkanah Watson. He worked for many years in Albany, New York, as a banker and businessman, but when he retired to Pittsfield, Massachusetts, he raised merino sheep on a farm. He was looking to improve agricultural practices in the area, and so Watson formed the Berkshire Agricultural Society. And this group organized an annual exhibition and competition to showcase the area's livestock. Here, farmers could earn a prize of $70 for the best oxen, cattle, sheep, and pig exhibits. Fairs that took place afterward included more competitions for field and orchard crops, home crafts, and other activities for all members of the family to enjoy. Watson continued to help form agricultural societies throughout the area with their own shows, and by 1819, most counties in New England had a county fair. And the concept of the county fair spread throughout the East and Midwest for the remainder of the 19th century. And as the fairs developed, more features were added, such as food vendors, local merchants, games, baking contests, and horse races. However, livestock shows and agricultural competitions remained the main focus of county fairs. And fairs became anticipated events, and farm families would plan for months to take their time off to enjoy the county fair. And technology also became an important feature of county fairs. The fair became a place to display the latest technological advantages like electricity. Musical acts and other amusements introduced farmers to facets of American culture they may not otherwise see. In areas such as these, the county fair became a place where rural people got to learn about and experience what was going on in urban areas in America, while city dwellers learned more about agriculture and rural life. And as county fairs began to take hold, there was soon a need to make agricultural advancements and achievements known statewide, and this, of course, led to the State Fair. And so, in 1841, the first state fair sprung up in Syracuse, New York. And, just like you would see today, there were plowing contests and animal exhibits. And just like today, at these state fairs, crafts had a presence. However, back then, the displays and demonstrations were a matter of function. They were used to determine things like the types of wool a sheep might produce, or showing off the latest manufacturing of blacksmith techniques. And I must say, I am very well versed in county fairs. I spent much of my childhood participating in my home county fair, which is one of the reasons why I have been able to secure a college education, thanks to the money I earned from showing cattle. And let me be the first to tell you, it was hard work. Anyone who has never stood in a ring and showed a cow in denim pants in late July does not know heat. There were times that I legitimately felt like I was going to faint, but it made me tougher. And I did enjoy getting to raise my cow, which would then be sold at the end of every fair. But hey, like I said, it's for that reason I had money for college. Well, that and my scholarships. I also enjoyed getting to show off my cooking skills. Many's the blue ribbon I took home, and purple ribbon. I still have them to prove it. And with that, folks, I'm afraid I'm going to have to sign off now. What have we learned today? Well, for one thing, I think we've learned that popular perception is not always true. I mean, I was always told that originally to let farm children be able to work the land. Turns out not the case. And I think we've also learned that fairs have a long, fascinating history in the United States. And we have moral reformers to thank for summer camps. If there's one thing I know in this life, it's that children, especially male children, should never be left unsupervised, or else chaos will definitely ensue. And with that, I say goodbye, and God bless.